Okay, so a lot has happened this week in regards to sport. We know the Williams F1 team is up for sale after suffering major financial losses, and F1 is not a motorsport that I watch a lot of. It's I haven't watched a lot of F1 for a while, and obviously when it went fully to BT, no, to Sky Sports, should I say? Um, I really had my interest turned off massively. I'm not surprised that Williams F1 have had financial difficulties. They've been struggling at the back of the F1 grid for a couple of years now. The fact that the team is now up for sale is interesting. It'll be interesting to see who comes in to invest. The motoring industry as a whole has taken a beating this year with the pandemic and the lockdown. And F1 obviously hasn't had a race yet. And they are going through a rule change phase. And Liberty Media are well, in a position where, oh, is my phone going off? In a position where the TV rights is a big debating point about who gets the rights and the the amount of accessibility. Now, it'll be interesting to see when the next TV deal comes along what Liberty Media do. Be very interesting. On another motorsport note, NASCAR has returned, and they're doing a race for each class every 3 days. That's been quite interesting. A lot of the racing has been really interesting to watch in NASCAR. So if you're a NASCAR fan, they're back. No fans in attendance, and NASCAR is one of those first sports to make the leap back into restart mode. The NRL Rugby League in Australia restarted on the 28th, so we've had 3 days of NRL action for me to digest when I can get my subscription sorted out, and when we can obviously, once that gets sorted out, catching up with games over this round three. And some teams have dealt really well with the lockdown period and keeping their teams, fit, players ready to go, and have really kicked on. Like the Raiders are unbeaten in 3 games. The Melbourne Storm took a pummeling last night. Gold Coast Titans haven't, come out of this lockdown period with any momentum. And so certain teams have really dealt with the lockdown and the lack of rugby over the last couple months really well, and other teams have, well, really fallen apart and not done so well. So it'll be interesting when I actually get a chance to watch some NRL matches to see how certain teams play. I know some of the results. I know all of the results, but some teams did not fare well over the weekend. So that'll be interesting. On a football standpoint, obviously we know the Premier League is returning. We know La Liga is set to return as well. Serie A, we're not so sure about. The Bundesliga has got several rounds out the way, and it is an interesting one. There is still division amongst the playing group and clubs about should the season have to be paused again, points per game average deciding how a league finishes. We're not sure if the championship's going to restart. We're not sure what's happening with League One. We're not sure what's actually happening with League Two, even though the clubs have basically said we're happy to end the season now. So, while certain leagues seem to have put down the direction of travel they want to take for the rest of this season, it is interesting how the fact that TV companies are still expecting their rebate. That was part of the deal to get the league restarted. The wealthier clubs are going to pay back more money. There are games on free-to-air TV in the Premier League for the first time, and I think that's the thing that's going to stay. I think even when fans do have the ability to return to stadiums, I think there's going to be more league games on free-to-air coverage. I think the TV companies have realised that it will be a pretty risky move to keep it all behind a paywall. We know there's pressure to televise Champions League, Europa League on free-to-air off BT. I mean, BT obviously have their YouTube channel, and they do obviously have the final of both Europa League and Champions League on their YouTube channel. They have done for several years, but it will be interesting to see what happens with those tournaments. FA Cup, will the final actually take place on the 1st of August as planned? How will playing cup ties with the regular season get completed as well? That'll be interesting. The thoughts on Federer being the highest paid athlete in the world, that is an interesting one. And it's not surprising. He does have his own clothing brand, so people are still buying clothes, admittedly online. Obviously, there's a big agreement with Nike. He has, people are still able to play tennis. A lot of people do have tennis courts in their back gardens if they are wealthy enough. There's a lot of houses that when I'm working on the bins and collecting the rubbish, that have tennis courts. So there are people who do have access to tennis courts. Any Roger Federer branded stuff can be sold. You can buy equipment online. And when sport does resume behind closed doors, tennis clubs will open because you can socially distance. And I can see a lot of people. I think the fact that he's managed to make so much money already so far this year is astounding, considering that no tennis has been played since March, and none of the majors have been played yet, apart from the Australian. The fact that the French Open and Wimbledon have been cancelled this year, we're not sure about the US Open. It is surprising that he's managed to make that much money, but I think it is a rich sport, but it is also accessibility to those tennis courts. Under this lockdown in the UK, there's tennis courts down the road from me in a local park. I think there's just 3 or 4 tennis courts in a park. The issue is obviously you still have to be a member of a local tennis club or a local club to have access. And that's what a lot of people don't realise is you need to have obviously permission to use them. And with the current lockdown, they have sort of been under lock and key a little bit. But yeah, you can play tennis in your back garden. I used to have a tennis racket and used to, put a little tennis net up and have a little play in our little back garden. But the fact that Roger Federer has managed to make so much money without, actually playing matches for 2 months is amazing, because tennis is a sport that also not only do the athletes rely heavily on their sponsorship deals, which they have to be paid out because they will appear on TV ads, they will appear on billboards, they will appear on merchandise. But it also is a sport that is heavily reliant on prize money, much like boxing, much like snooker, darts, if you class that as a sport. Those individualistic sports like golf, yes, you have your sponsors. Yes, you're a brand ambassador for these things, so they pay you to be a brand ambassador. But you also have to enter tournaments and take prize money for where you finish in that tournament. So you think he's done that without prize money coming in? That tells you, A, he's invested very wisely, and B, his sponsorship deals, are still paying out. Now, other sports, the athletes are being asked, especially in team sports, to take pay cuts. So it is interesting. Nadal has one less. He's a very good branded athlete. He's one of the wealthiest tennis players there is, and he does a lot for his local community in Spain. But Federer has had that extra bit of time at the top. Obviously, has very good investments and business dealings, and he can make a lot of money. Look at some of the golfers as well; they are worth a lot of money. Tiger Woods was one of the wealthiest sports stars at one point. I know he's still in the top 100, but Tiger Woods at his peak of his powers with the branding you can get out of Tiger Woods. Again, another Nike-sponsored athlete. Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, these Nike-sponsored athletes can actually launch their own brands with Nike support on the manufacturing side. Tiger Woods, a wealthy athlete. Some of these athletes and sports stars, especially in team sports, have taken a hit financially. You'll be surprised with Conor McGregor in Ireland. Not all the Irish back Conor McGregor. That's something that is interesting. But especially in those individualistic sports or motorsport, you will have an individual who will have be called the nation's champion. Especially if that particular nation hasn't reached the world championship and hadn't had an athlete or a driver win the ultimate prize for a long time. When they start having these fairy tale stories and getting close to winning tournaments, they suddenly have a nation backing them. Ronnie O'Sullivan, he's had his own TV program. He's done, his American Hustle. I watched. So Peter Crouch has now got his own TV show on the BBC. So some athletes and sports stars do carve out another career in the media. They're not just the sports star. I mean, Vinnie Jones went into acting. Frank Leboeuf's gone, I think, into modelling or something. David Ginola, the football player, went into vineyards. Eric Cantona's done a bit of acting and being a brand ambassador. But Peter Crouch going into the media like Freddie Flintoff and Robbie Savage and others, they carved out a very, very good media career. Not just doing sport related stuff. I mean, Peter Crouch has obviously got this new program of his coming up every Saturday on British TV, and I think he's carved quite a decent career in the media, and it isn't all sport related, and that's something that when athletes retire, not a lot of thought is given to what they do post retirement. Now, some go into coaching, some go into commentary or being an expert on the sport. Others choose a completely different career path, but not. This is the problem with BT Sport. I think with the BBC, Savage is not necessarily the leading pundit. He's not the leading commentator. With BT, obviously, this is part of the problem. They've got Jake Humphrey as their main football presenter. He is utterly not, on the same level as others. I wouldn't put him on the same level as Des Lynam at his peak. I mean, and I think the desperation BT has is not all their presenters and guests are actually contracted to BT. They actually are technically borrowed or freelanced from other organisations, and they have to pay them an appearance fee. And some of the commentators and experts and guests are arguing that they're not getting their full fees because they've been contracted for so many weekends or so many programs. BT, it's a mess. I wouldn't say Robbie Savage is a bad pundit. He's done very well on the BBC on the radio and in commentary at various tournaments. He's done very well. He's not long retired from the game. That's why I think Robbie Savage is quite good in the aspect that he's recently retired in the last decade. There are some commentators and pundits, especially ex-players, who are so far retired from the game and the sport that they commentate on, that I think their opinion has become not necessarily less valid, but the sport has changed since they played. Massively changed. I've met Steve McManaman. He is actually not the most charismatic individual. I don't think he as a commentator is the right choice. As a playing expert, looking at his role, if he's analysing a midfielder, especially a creative midfielder, yeah, Steve McManaman is someone you would want to look to analyse that player's play. It's like Jonathan Davis on rugby, both be it league or union. The game has changed so much since he played in the 80s and the 90s that it is painful listening to his opinion sometimes. The game has evolved. The sport has evolved. And the style of rugby he played is different to the style of rugby being played now. The players are bigger, faster, more athletic. There's a lot more skill into the game, with even big players being quite skillful. Tactics have changed, nutrition's changed, fitness has changed. More scrum halves are kicking more. And he also is a very annoying commentator. Jerry Guskett, I mean, I think he's been out of the game so long that is he the right person to have as a rugby pundit? You could say Keith Wood's been out of the game a long time, but Keith Wood actually, I think, is out of the three that I've named the best. He's retired latest. He's been out of the game less time than Guskett and Jonathan Davis, but he's still been out of the game 17, 18 years. He retired in the 2003 World Cup. That's 17 years ago. Keith Wood retired. But I think he and Brian O'Driscoll and Peter O'Connell, I find them better when it comes to Six Nations coverage and analysis of the game they're watching or the phase of play they're commentating on than Guskett or Jonathan Davis. McManaman, though, I have heard his commentary. It's not the best. And this is another problem that BT has. They have very uninspiring presenters and commentators. Very uninspiring. I mean, their rugby coverage is average at best. I think that the problem that BT Sport has is how they launched it, how they marketed it. They were already competing against established broadcasters. I mean, Premier Sports is older than BT Sport. Yeah, Premier Sports is a bit more niche, possibly, with some more niche sports on it. But BT Sport were coming into the subscription sports TV market when it was already, you had the overseas and Oh yeah, I mean Mike Tyson. The rumours of Mike Tyson making a comeback. I was discussing this earlier with my friend actually. While we went for a walk, Maidenhead, and walked down the river to Eton Dorney, where the Olympic rowing was held, or nearly to Eton Dorney. They closed one of the roads off for repair. But the Mike Tyson possible comeback. A lot of these boxers retire and then make comeback fights. A lot of it's to do with them post-retirement not being brilliant with their money. A lot of them, you look at a lot of boxers and a lot of them end up bankrupt. I think a lot of it's to do with money. Um, a lot of boxers and a lot of athletes in general aren't great with money. A lot of them have money issues. This is a problem that you see in sport, and with this lockdown as well, and players and athletes not being able to train, not being able to do things, high-profile athletes misbehaving, not just in the UK but across the board. We've had so many players, football players, and rugby players, and rugby league players, and individualistic athletes who like boxers and tennis players. The list of them misbehaving, it's worse in football. Other sports have individuals or incidents happening. You look at the NRL with Nathan Cleary and his TikTok video. You look at Josh Adokar and Latrell Mitchell and their adventure weekend with about 30 of their mates being forced to apologise. It's not a good look when you're asking your government in Australia, the NRL, are asking for aid, basically. And it doesn't help if when you're trying to get the public on side to restart and to get government assistance and to write off debts, when your high profile superstar players are basically pissing about. And you look at the memes. I mean, Christ, you look at the social media response. Memes are the best. They became a meme, and the NRL has a massive problem. I'm going to have to look at every off season how many players end up getting fined or suspended. But it's mad. Mayweather shows off his money, even, but yeah, Mayweather. I can't stand Floyd Mayweather Jr. There's being arrogant when you're the best. But the McGregor fight, the fight against the Japanese kickboxer, these silly fights that are making a mockery of the sport involved, boxing. He's done nothing for the image of boxing in the last 5 years that's positive. And boxing is a sport that does have image problems at times when you have fighters who, when they retire, end up destitute. This is a sport that's got so much money in it at the top end that it stuns me that world champions and Commonwealth champions or unification champions or whatever belt you're fighting for, or whatever weight division, you look at all these great boxers who made a lot of money. Not all boxers make a lot of money, but the top end boxers, and how many of them in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are living destitute or have been declared bankrupt or have serious health issues and they're not being looked after. It's mad. I'm assuming you're talking about Tyson. If there's been a mystique around Mike Tyson, I mean, Mike Tyson's done a bit of acting. He's done a bit of media appearances. The brand itself is still worth millions of dollars. He is a brand. Iron Mike. I mean, he at his prime was possibly the scariest pound for pound fighter in the history of boxing. But the amount of controversy surrounding Mike Tyson as well, this is what draws people to the name. You look at some of the great champions, and then I get that, but on the lower card, you get some boxers who are journeymen who box 10, 12 times a year, like once a month. They're in the ring having anywhere from 5 to 12 round bouts, depending on the boxing border classification they're boxing under and depending on who they're fighting. If they're on the undercard, a lot of the undercard generally are fighting up to double figures times a year. The top end fighters, are fighting once, twice, possibly 3 times a year. Sometimes there's a build up of 2 years to a fight. That's where the promoters make their money. That's when the advertisers pay the money to the prize pot. And I think boxing does have problems with the sport. I think it's mad that there's so many world championship belts. There's not one international governing body. There's like 4 or 5, and then you've got all the national governing bodies as well. That is a problem that boxing needs to address, is its governance. Mayweather. Oh god, if Mayweather was fighting 10 years earlier at the start of his career, I don't think he's made it as far as he has. Personally, I think he would have been on his arse after about 15 fights. He would have lost twice. I think Mayweather is an interesting. His technique is interesting. He does wear you down by making you go on the aggressive a lot of the time and waste a lot of energy. Um, but at the same time, I think again each era is different. Sport evolves. We have the discussion about, I personally feel like football is not at the same quality level as it was 10, 20 years ago. I think 10, 20 years ago, you had multiple players at the end of every season who could be voted for a Ballon d'Or. Now you have 2 or 3, who, apart from Messi and Ronaldo, who could equal them, because the way the Ballon d'Or seems to be decided on who scores the most goals. The championship to return on the 20th. That is interesting because there is a division between the clubs at championship level. There are threats from the Leeds chairman of a Premier League Type 2, like Mark II, like a second-tier Premier League. We have that in the championship. I think the way the leagues are named is a problem. I think the branding of the leagues, like League One, League Two, Championship, Premiership, we are going to see changes to the league structure going forward. How long fans stay out of stadiums is another thing. We know that from tomorrow, professional sport can resume in this country behind closed doors, in England only. So when you're looking at Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, there are differences in place. We know horse racing is the first professional sport in England to restart. I think Newcastle on the all-weather has the first race meet. That's going to be interesting because obviously no fans in attendance, and this is a sport that relies heavily on fans being in attendance and gambling. So it will be interesting to see how many of the racing meets are televised in the coming weeks. We know we've got the Derby coming up, like the 2,000 guineas and all that. It'll be interesting to see how horse racing adapts without fans. I don't want to seem like a jackass, but these non-American soccer players getting into American politics faster days, does the world revolve America that much? It is interesting. I think we obviously have had the debate about racism and discrimination in football, not just in the UK, but across Europe in recent years, with some high-profile incidents across Europe, not just in the UK. Players have raised concerns about this. I mean, since the channel has been in existence for the last 3 years, we obviously had the Mark Sampson scandal, which revolved around inappropriate sense of humour, inappropriate jokes that may or may not have involved racial undertones. And yes, there is an ongoing issue. We've seen a rise in the amount of incidents recorded in recent years at football matches. And I think the media's got a part to play in it as well. A lot of the media companies have American investment in this country. Sky, the Murdoch family, still owns shares in B Sky B, and Comcast is an American company, so Sky has got American investment. I believe some of the other TV channels that you can receive on Freeview, Freesat, or Sky Virgin, that they are American owned, or show American programming. There is a lot in the media. A lot of money comes from America to the global media. A lot of sports owners are American, the teams and sponsors. The issue with, I think, part of the reason why social media has fueled this as well, with high profile sports players, there is that to consider. Oh, my phone's going off. Who's messaging me? Oh, hang on a second. But no, we on the side of they are high profile athletes in a sense. Football is the national sport. It does make some logical sense why they would highlight this issue, considering that racism is an ongoing um, uh, uh, oh God. Okay. My friend's had a motorcycle accident a couple of hours ago, and I literally just saw him 4 or 5 hours ago. My mate's just had a motorcycle accident. Oh, shit. So I'm gonna have to possibly cut this stream short and find out what's going on. Oh Christ, it's the second accident in a month as well. He hit a deer at the beginning of the month. So I might have to cut this stream short and see if I can contact his girlfriend. And it doesn't sound good if he's up in Wrexham. It sounds quite bad. So I might have to cut this stream short. But give us. I'll try and get hold of people in a moment. Yeah. Fuck. Okay, that's a bit of a distraction. On the well, with the COVID-19, I think as I'm not a relative, they probably won't let me see him. I'm not gonna lie. This is something that fans in stadiums. So when I say he's had a motorcycle accident, yeah, I'm not relative, so going to see him is out of the question. They're trying to keep people going into and out of the hospital who don't need to be there as minimum as possible. And this is again something that will be discussed with sport. What happens if a player gets injured? And the likelihood of players getting injured is quite high, as they haven't played rugby or football or rugby league for a while. We are going to see a spike in injuries in the first, I would say, month of being back playing again. The first 2-3 weeks of playing again, I think we're going to see a spike in injuries. So then what happens? You've got to have daily or weekly tests. It's going to be interesting. And if a player gets injured, they're going to be in an environment where you're more likely to catch the virus. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if players have to go to hospital for an injury. That's an interesting one, but I might have to end the stream actually get hold of people and let them know what's going on, because that's it's done. I don't think it'd be overly serious. I hope not. But he's been having problems with motorcycle. Oh shit! I'm gonna have to go because I think this is actually quite serious. Yeah, I'm gonna have to call this a stream until I can actually until I can sort out what's going on. So I will be back online possibly in a bit, possibly tomorrow. But for now, I'm sorry guys, got to leave. But I'll have some more videos for you soon. I've just got to find out what's going on. Shit.